Do you feel like people are ready? Like, are we past the Gen AI? Like, okay, we know it's here now, or are people still getting acquainted? What's your feeling with the customers you're reaching out to?
We're getting a lot of we're ready and we're ready to go, but there is this nervousness and this hesitancy around this technology. I think it's still quite intimidating, to everyone. I think as we see it move more into like our B2C, our consumer lives, it's going to become more familiar to us, and we're going to become more, open to it. Maybe as we see it more, easily available on our phones and all those kind of areas. But it's still intimidating to a lot of folks out there, and there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of trust. I think that typical Gartner hype curve. I'm sure you're familiar with that. We've definitely seen like that peak that's happened over the last 12 months. And to some extent, we might be coming off the top of that peak a bit, and people are now, is this really adding value? And at some point we'll realize that plane where everybody recognizes the true value that the technology can bring. But I don't think we have a choice, Josh. I think it's coming. It's going to be part of our lives. And it's going to keep rolling. I'll never forget the story my dad tells. It's about him on a plane in the late 1990s, and he's sitting next to someone who's reading a newspaper, and they kind of lean over to my dad and say, "Well, do you think this internet thing's ever going to really take off?" And my dad obviously said, "Yes, this is going to be something like huge and big." And the person reading the newspaper was, "Well, I don't know, this is going to be good for gaming or good for this or good for that." They couldn't see that vision. It's the same with AI. It's going to be in everything that we interact with. So we need to get there, and we need to be used to that. And if we're denying that, if we're still reading the paper, we're just prolonging that point till we actually become accustomed to it, and it hits our lives.
Yeah, I think there's two things here. So I agree with you. It's going to be part of every bit of life. And, when we're training new populations of people, I say, okay, so don't just use it as we're doing it during the training. Try to use it. And this is where I tell them to use Copilot or something open source for everything you do this week. Write your kid's birthday invitation on it. Write an email to your mom. Write your holiday newsletter. And that's just building the familiarity, so when they come back to the work environment and you're in your closed system, they're more comfortable. And you're just learning how to interact. We've got to remember that some people, the older generation, we're training them back before the age of internet, essentially, right? Internet era of things. Other people, the new people that have grown up with some prompting, right? The younger generation, they're used to it. But essentially, we're deconditioning 20 years of interaction with like searches like Google, where we're essentially Boolean search yelling at the system, Starbucks close open, right? Starbucks close open now, right? And, you're kind of screaming at the system, and then it gives you some outputs. And now being able to talk to it like humans again, you have to decondition one way. And you have to trust the natural language processing and just be comfortable. If at first you don't succeed, prompt again, right?
100% right, Josh. I was at a conference last year, and there were a couple of lawyers at that conference there, and they had just piloted AI in terms of finding pieces of content, so like a research assistant inside the firm, and they were sharing that people were still reverting back to the more kind of formulaic Boolean type search because that's how they've been conditioned. But there's an easier way to do that, because you could just type the question in and get the response. But they didn't want to go there. They just weren't comfortable with that. They reverted back to the Boolean. Nothing wrong with that, right? Yeah. But as we've both said now, it's going to come, and then we're going to be able to interact with this very, very differently. And the more we can encompass that into our everyday lives, the more that familiarity builds, the better and faster we're going to actually see the productivity gains from that.
I use analogies like endlessly to help people have points of departure, right, on these things, right? And, one that you just kind of prompted in my mind that I frequently tell people, a way to look at the front end before you even start generation, the research power of it is, imagine you've got that new research assistant in your company, and you've got all the filing cabinets in the basement. And when you ask a question, that person, you give them some guidance, right? And they go down and they're scanning through the filing cabinets for a week or 2 weeks, and they come back with the 5 documents they think you wanted, right?
Right.
If they didn't, that only takes 1 minute now, not 2 weeks. B, if they didn't come back with the right ones, the first thing you say as a leader is, oh, should I reframe my question? That's no different than rewriting your prompt. It doesn't mean you failed, just rewrite it. And the second thing is, if they didn't get it right, recraft your prompt and it comes back in a minute, not 2 more weeks, right?
Exactly.
And if you think about someone running down to the filing cabinets, that's what's happening at an exponential rate with everything you've ever done, right?
Right.
And it's a point of departure of just reframe the question as a leader and trust the research assistant at the front end, right? It's super powerful.
It's an excellent analogy.